Okay, so it feels kind of necessary to give a disclaimer here. Um, Me and Brett agreed to have this discussion, and I think it was a very fruitful discussion, and it showed, among other things, that people can have these discussions on things they disagree about and things they feel strongly about, and still, get together and have that talk and actually discuss, why they feel the way they feel. And the disclosure that's necessary here is that one of the things we do is we read through the law here. We read through the law in Texas that we're talking about, and neither me or Brett are lawyers. And I felt like that was necessary to kind of be a disclaimer. We're not lawyers. We're not claiming to know exactly how to read these legal documents. We're just doing the best we can as two average people, reading a state law and discussing it, and discussing why we feel that way. If you watch the video, you'll notice there's a few times in there that there's kind of a break in the video and audio, and then it comes back. We got interrupted with a few different things throughout these, and the recording actually ended up being 2 different days. So if you can, don't let that bother you. There's several places where I had to cut things out of the video because would get interrupted for one reason or another. Now I also added a brief explanation clip at the very end because when I watched through this again, I realized that at the end, when we give our final thoughts on this law, I didn't hammer out what I was trying to get to. I feel like I didn't complete that thought. I only got part of the way through it, and I added just a finishing out of that thought at the very end of this. Hopefully Brett's okay with that. I just wanted to make sure when people read it that they understood why I was saying what I said. So anyway, hopefully anyone who watches this feels, that we accomplished what we set out to show that this discussion can be had in a rational way, with no name calling, with no, degenerate behavior. So hopefully you enjoy it, and let me know what you think. Okay, all right, so it's recording now. So you just start with the things that you're concerned about, and then we'll talk a little bit about the language that we've heard around the law, and then we'll go into the law itself.
Yeah, one of the things, and it's like opinion, the people in Texas are saying that life is sacred and all this other, okay? And I believe that, okay? And they're saying that life begins whenever I think they said you can't get an abortion after 6 weeks or if you hear a fetal heartbeat. And I've heard people saying that a heartbeat alone does not represent life as such. And these are medical people, so I can't, help on that, But it bothers me that a group of anybody is going to tell anybody what to do with their body as far as what they can do. Now, I'm not pro-abortion. I don't think that people should just go around, my dress doesn't fit because I'm pregnant, I'm going to get an abortion, or it's 9 months into the pregnancy and I'm really showing, and my husband just left, and what am I going to do? So we got to abort. I don't believe in all that stuff, But one of the things with the abortion law that I've heard was that there's no exception for rape or for incest or for age of the mother. And that's what I've heard, and I believe I've seen it. I don't have the reference here with me. But if that's the case, how far are we going to go with this thing? I mean, if an 11-year-old gets raped by Osama bin Laden, okay, the Texas law I think is saying that she can't get rid of the baby. Okay, which means that you've got a 12-year-old with a child that was forced upon her, and all that stands for. Now, again, if you make the decision at 8 months or 9 months, that's a whole different deal. But if she gets raped September the 1st, and then September the 30th, you find out that there's something cooking,
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time with not letting would not terminating that pregnancy. I just do,
Absolutely, yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. The so the it looks like what you brought up there is that you're under the understanding there's no exception for rape and incest,
That's what I've
things like
heard.
that, and you're under the impression that an 11-year-old could be made to keep her baby.
That's what I've heard. Okay, if
Okay.
I'm wrong, I'll correct it, but that's what I've heard.
All right. So some of the language that I've heard around it is, as you saw, the thing that started our discussion
Yeah.
was the Texganistan thing, and I think it's because I've been in a few discussions about what's going on in Afghanistan
Yeah.
and what a Sharia governed state looks like.
Okay.
And
Texganistan was what I would call hyperbole
oh, absolutely,
and hyperbolic rhetoric if somebody used
yeah,
it on me. But I used it. I borrowed it from a friend and I used it for a
right,
purpose.
right. No, I've
Uh,
seen a lot
uh,
more people using it. I mean, it's
yeah.
because I've got a lot of my friends on Facebook. There's a lot on the left. There's a lot on the right, and I've seen a lot of
Hmm.
other people using it. And what it really reminded me of was the way, as equally as unreasonable, I think, is the way that a lot of the vaccination requirements and mask mandates and things on the right are being compared with the Holocaust. The
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard
people are
that.
saying
It is?
it's we're being numbered,
Oh,
like the
please.
Jews, and we're being
Uh,
dominated the same way that the Germans dominated the Jews. I mean, again, an extreme
yeah. Yeah.
grasp, but comparable, I think, to comparing this abortion law in Texas to Afghanistan, to the
Yeah.
way
Well,
that
okay.
women are
Uh,
treated over there.
Again, the Texganistan is hyperbole.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, so is the
Okay.
other. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Are any women in Texas being treated as bad as the average woman in Afghanistan is facing? I'd have to say no. I mean, if somebody kidnapped you and they made you a slave, we
Hmm.
could still argue about you getting a better life than somebody in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So that wasn't meant to be a literal
Oh yeah, no,
comparison.
yeah, absolutely. I was just comparing the hyperbole of both.
Yeah.
The both are hyperbole and both go
Oh
from
yeah.
the absolute top shelf. What's the worst I can make this sound?
Hmm.
You know,
Well, I mean,
kind of,
but
you
you
know.
do that to get attention, and then like
Oh,
people
absolutely,
like
yeah.
us, hopefully we sit down and discuss it. Well, I really didn't mean to throw an egg on the car, but I had to get the driver's attention. Now that
Right,
we get,
right,
that's,
right. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. But yeah, a lot of people are referring to it as the most restrictive abortion law that there's been in recent years, and there's when I read through it, like I said, it's I'm coming away from it with a much different view than a lot of this has been, and I think when we start into the language of it, um, we'll get to some real detail here. So here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to try this. I'm going to do a screen share.
okay.
I guess one participant at a time is fine. I'm going to do...
Okay.
I had two documents open. One of them I had highlighted.
Yeah,
Yeah, let
I
me
saw
do this.
that. Yeah.
Okay, let me do this. All right. Now you can see the document and you can see us in
Okay.
the corner, right?
Okay, I've got one that's got number 6 highlighted.
Okay. Where did my...
Can I scroll
Okay,
this,
there we
or are you controlling it?
I'm controlling it. I'm controlling it.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I just thought we could walk through it this way. So let me go all the way back to the top here. And I'm going to go over what I think are the high points of it, and then we can
Okay.
dissect it in detail.
Yeah. Another thing that bothers me, though, jumping ahead maybe, they said that I've heard on like National Public Radio and people who are discussing the law and how it's structured.
Hmm.
They said that the Supreme Court really has got their hands tied because the Supreme Court can't go to a government agency and tell them they can't enforce it because the way the law is written, civilians can enforce it, or not enforce it, but they can be part of the enforcement process.
Right, right.
So I mean, I can't sue my next door neighbor, or the Supreme Court can't. So yeah.
Right. So that's some of the interesting stuff that I want to get into about
Okay.
this law. So we got the first section here. It just says, this is what it's relating to. This is going to be about
Yeah.
abortion. be it enacted, and then it's got Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3. Now, when you see...
I'm sorry. It says this act shall be known as the Texas Heartbeat Act.
Right, right.
Yeah.
The legislature finds the state of Texas never repealed or either... And this is a statement about Roe v. Wade and how the state laws didn't repeal or anything in response to Roe v. Wade. So we can come back to that. That's a little bit different discussion, but let's just focus on this law here.
Right, okay.
All right, so when you see this subchapter H, there's no other subchapters to this. So when we're reading through this and it says it refers to this subchapter, it's talking about this entire law, all these changes that we're going to read through here.
And all this it says detection of fetal heartbeat. So I guess the law is anchored on the heartbeat.
Yeah, definitely part of it. So this is just the definitions. All these things are just definitions of all these words. So we can come back to that as we need definitions. We'll come back to that. So let's get past the definitions here. All right. So the first part is the legislative findings. This is what really a lot of this is anchored to.
Yeah.
So when it says legislature finds, according to contemporary medical research, that one. So you were talking about the heartbeat and what a lot of this was tied to. So the way the laws were, the heartbeat has become a key medical predictor that an unborn child will reach live birth.
Okay, but is that a lawyer, politician, legislator statement, or is that a doctor? I know what I'm talking about as far as life and death is concerned.
Well, this is written by legislators, so it's definitely legislator wording. But I think you could, if you wanted to challenge the medical feasibility of that or the medical accuracy of that, I think that probably could happen. So let me, before we move on here, there's a thing here that I think we could say that we agreed on. So we can agree that abortion a day after conception is not killing anyone.
Right? I wouldn't think so.
That's like a clump of cells.
Yeah,
even if
because
it's reached a clump at that point.
It's but see, again, using non-medical language.
Sure.
If a sperm and an egg come together and there's activity there, then somebody can stretch the meaning of life and say, obviously there's life. Look, there's something going on,
Right. So just for me and you, for our opinion, we would say that just a fertilized egg is not reached the point where it's life.
No.
And then we could also agree that 8.5 months along, that's
a whole different deal.
That is a life.
Yeah. Right. And there are late term abortion laws, and from what I've heard, the only way you can get a late term abortion is if the woman is basically just dying, and you got to get the fetus out, or if the fetus has already died, and to leave the fetus inside is going to cause the woman harm. But you can't at 8 months say, well, my kid has Down syndrome, and terminate the pregnancy. I think that's illegal. I'm pretty sure it is anyway.
Right. So here but just for that, I just wanted to make sure we've got an agreement there, a point of agreement, where we would say that 8.5 months along, that is just an unborn child. It's a life that's there, and right after conception, that's not yet a life.
Yeah, it's
just a fertilized egg. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so somewhere, just for our own opinions, we would say somewhere in between there, life happens.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we have to.
That was a guarded yes, but
No, that's most people's perspective. Somewhere in between there, life happens. And
but that's the argument point though, because they say, well, okay, well, where is it?
Right. Exactly.
What is that point?
Yeah. So that's the debate that goes on, and one of the things that constantly comes up in this discussion and in abortion discussion in general is that because of the repercussions of actually concluding that point. So let's just call it like point X on the timeline. Life happens.
Okay.
If we concede to that, then the left has to agree that after point X, it's life, which doesn't seem like anything that a lot of the left will ever do. And then the right has to agree that before X, it's not life, which is nothing the right is ever going to do.
Right.
So both sides have kept their foot on the brake on this issue,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
on making any progress on actually determining where point X is.
Well, again, it's like I was telling you earlier. Somebody used reason, and I got mad because I couldn't beat them with reason because they had better reason than I had. And the people on either side, well, life starts here. Well, how do you know? Well, because, and they'll come up with their reasons. And then the people who say life doesn't start there, they'll come up with their reasons, and nobody's going to back out of it because it's political, it's religious, it's
right. So, but we mess, could just for our own opinions, we could say that there's some point X between these two extremes at which life happens, and that we would agree that after point X
or potential life.
We would agree that after point X, abortion, if it should be avoided if possible.
Yes, I could agree with that.
Okay, and then before point X, it's more or less up to the mother.
Yeah, but here's another thing. Jumping in, I can't get pregnant. I mean, it's obvious. So why do males have the right to tell females what they can and cannot do?
Well, remember, we're not telling anybody what they can and can't. We're just discussing.
Okay.
we're just talking. We're not trying to tell anybody what they can and can't do.
No problem.
So we agree to those points. After point X, it's this way. And before point X, it's this way.
Right.
Both the left and the right have kept their foot on the brake here because to give on that, to actually agree on that point would be a concession.
Yeah, you gotta expand. Not you gotta. They have to expand that point X so that both sides can get inside of that point X and discuss. Because right now it's like this, and there's no room.
Yeah,
they need to open it up and be able to talk back and forth.
And philosophically, you could say that the point X needs to be wide enough that both can claim victory.
Well, as far as winning versus losing, because somebody's going to claim that they did it, and somebody's going to claim, I can't lose this, I can't win this. But the bottom line is, what is best for the mother? Because she's got to make the decision and live with it, and then what is best for the potential child. Now, if using the point X, if both sides agree that point X on one side is no life, then it's not a problem, But
exactly,
if people are going to say, well, we're past point X, and somebody's going to say, well, point X needs to be widened. You can't see my hands. Point X is here. Point X needs to be widened up some.
So that there's a gray area.
Yeah.
In between two,
because stuff doesn't the only time stuff happens immediately without discussion is when you're in basic training and the TI tells you to do something and you got no stand up, sir, yes sir, that's the way it goes.
Okay.
Any other time it should be like, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's fine. So I was just going to say that's the point I was trying to make. So we would both agree there's some point X that this happens. Yes. This number one here seems to be that Texas has determined that point X is a heartbeat. Okay. That's what they've determined. And that's where a lot of this is going to be anchored to. Like you said, it's going to be anchored to that whole idea. Exactly. Now, I highlighted this in number 4 just because it's going to come back to us later, this informed choice language here. Cardiac activity begins at a biologically identifiable moment in time, normally when the fetal heart is formed in the gestational sac. So this finding here is saying that the cardiac activity, in the baby is happening then, as soon as the heart is there. Texas has a compelling interest from the outset of a woman's pregnancy in protecting the health of the woman and the life of the unborn child. That's, where a lot of the controversy comes in.
They say it's the heartbeat, and then Texas says we're trying to protect everybody. But again, we've defined what point X is for us. Okay. They've got to define, is point X the heartbeat? Is point X brain activity? What is it?
This seems to be their point X, is the heartbeat. Yeah. That's where they're going from.
You're going to get medical people that are going to argue that, though.
Yeah. Well, that could be an argued point in medical fields. It's true.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that. I just was saying that
I'm
seems to
not
be
either.
that it seems to be their identified point X.
Yeah.
So this statement here is saying that Texas feels it's they're compelled. Texas has compelling interests from the outset of a woman's pregnancy in protecting the health of the woman and the life of the unborn child. To make an informed choice about whether to continue her pregnancy, the pregnant woman has a compelling interest in knowing the likelihood of her unborn child surviving full-term birth. So
It's based on the presence of cardiac activity.
yeah. So
okay, but
this is they're gonna explain this later. Number 4 is gonna come back later. This part here has a compelling interest in knowing the likelihood. Have you seen some states, if a woman goes to get an abortion, she's required to see the sonogram and see that there's a what the baby looks like at that point.
Yeah.
And this is compelling interest in knowing the likelihood of her. This is all going to come down to a waiver that they've included in this law, where she is saying, "I understand this, and it's a big long list. But that's what this is going to come back to, and we'll get to that at the very end.
Okay. Will she have permission to get the abortion if she completes the checklist, or what? Or they're still saying no?
Yeah, partially, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that at the end.
Okay.
All right, this we don't really have to get too involved in the determination of the presence of a fetal heartbeat, because a lot of this is medical jargon.
Yeah, right.
This is just how they decide if there's a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the prohibition itself.
Where
Except as provided by 171.205, which we'll get to in a minute. A physician may not knowingly perform or induce an abortion on a pregnant woman if the physician detected a fetal heartbeat for an unborn child as required by Section 203, which is the one we just read.
Yeah.
That's 203. Now, the important thing here, and this is what it comes back to in a minute, you'll see this more explicitly written. Except as provided in section here, a physician may not knowingly perform. This does not say that a woman cannot knowingly have done an abortion.
Okay, but who's going to do it?
This is that's what I'm trying to point out here, and we're going to get to it in a minute. Is that this law explicitly is about the person performing the abortion.
Okay.
So we'll explore that more in a minute, but I'll show you the significance of that.
Okay.
A physician does not violate this section if the physician performed a test for fetal heartbeat as required by that and did not detect a fetal heartbeat. So if he checked and found no heartbeat, then he's not in violation of the section and performs an abortion. This section does not affect the provisions of this chapter that restrict or regulate the abortion by a particular method or during a particular stage of pregnancy, or any other provision of state law that regulates. In other words, it's saying this law doesn't nullify any other laws.
So basically, if I'm reading this right, if a woman is 6 months pregnant, you
mean 6 weeks?
No, 6 months. A woman is 6 months pregnant.
Oh, okay. You're getting okay.
And there's concern that the baby might not be healthy, and the doctor performs an examination, and there's no fetal heartbeat. Then that baby is.
She can get it aborted. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Exception for medical emergency. If anything happens, this is one of the big exceptions here.
Okay.
Sections 203 and 204, that's everything we've read just now.
Yeah.
Do not apply if a physician believes a medical emergency exists and prevents compliance with this subchapter. So, if at all the pregnancy threatens the woman's life in any way, it can be aborted. It's no longer subject to this law.
Okay.
Now, in most physician realms, there is an age at which, because I wanted to get to your question earlier about the 11-year-old, most realms there is an age at which it is unsafe to carry that baby to term.
Yeah.
They don't define that here, but I would imagine an 11-year-old meets that.
I would hope.
Definition, yeah. So let's just read through these. Physician who performs or induces an abortion under circumstances described in the subsection shall make written notations in the pregnant woman's medical record of, and then first the physician's belief that a medical emergency necessitated the abortion. Number 2, the medical condition of the pregnant woman that prevented compliance with this subchapter. And C, so you see A, B, and C, and then they've got 2 parts to B. A physician performing or inducing an abortion under this section shall maintain in the physician's practice records and copies of the notation. Okay. So all this is...
That makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense.
All this is saying is that in a medical emergency, an abortion can be performed.
Yeah.
All right. Construction of the subchapter. This is the outlining the whole intent of this law. Part B is very important here. So let's do Part A first. This subchapter does not create or recognize the right to an abortion before or after fetal heartbeat is detected. That's where we're getting back to the fetal heartbeat.
Does not create or recognize the right. Okay.
Right. So then we know that part already. We've got to the 6 weeks already. So Part B here, this subchapter may not be construed to authorize the initiation of a cause of action against or the prosecution of a woman on whom an abortion is performed or induced or attempted to be performed or induced in violation of this subchapter.
Hold on.
Yeah, it's this is important. This part's very important here.
It says not authorize. It says may not be construed to authorize the initiation of a cause of action against or the prosecution of a woman
on whom an abortion is performed or induced or attempted to be performed or induced in violation of this subchapter.
Okay.
So what that's saying is, and this
sounds kind of conflicting with what.
So
go ahead.
This is what clarifies that earlier statement. So who is in violation here? If a woman goes and gets an abortion at 4 months, the
woman's not in violation. The doctor is.
Exactly.
Or the medical professional is. Yeah.
The medical professional is in violation. The woman cannot be prosecuted at all.
Okay, but here's the question now. If you're a doctor and you perform abortions, and you read this law and you say that the woman's not going to be prosecuted, which was not what you wanted anyway.
Right.
But as you read back, you find that the doctor or the medical professional can be held responsible and be prosecuted.
Mm-hmm.
As a doctor, are you going to perform abortions in that state?
So that's where you have to look at this and decide what you want. This is the most important part of this law to me, because if the law said that the woman can be prosecuted, then she can't just go to New Mexico or Arizona or anywhere and get an abortion and come back.
Right.
This right here provides a huge loophole to women that just want to go to another state and get an abortion.
Okay, but here's the deal. Texas is a big state.
Sure,
and
sure.
if you're on the east side of Texas, if you're on the east side of Texas, you're up against Louisiana. Mm-hmm. I doubt if they're going to be as receptive to abortions as Nevada.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, So
yeah, I mean there's obviously there's some issues about who can actually get to another state.
Yeah, I mean the one go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's not super restrictive in that way though. What I'm saying is the importance of this is that when someone says a woman can't, that's not accurate. If someone says a woman can't get an abortion,
okay, but see that's kind of like twisting the language. Okay, if you say, how can I say this? If I've got a Corvette and I say I can't do 150 miles an hour, you can't say, well, yes, you can, because the car goes that fast. If I say, no, I can't, because the traffic is situated so that I can't, and the traffic is by law.
It's sort of. I think the more accurate comparison would be that would be to have a vehicle that is required to have working brakes.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to get your brakes taken off, then no mechanic can legally take the brakes off your car.
That's true.
That's sort of the more, you have to have a third party there involved.
That works. Yeah. Okay. That works. Yeah.
But no, the reason I wanted to stay here, because this is what makes it really interesting to me, is because there is no way that a woman in the state of Texas can be in violation of this law.
Yeah. The woman's not on the hook. The medical professionals are. Yeah.
Right. There's no way a woman can be in violation of this law. Okay. Now,
That's a minor technicality, but I'll grant
it's
it. You
big to
know.
me because in other states it's not that way. In other states have laws in place to make it to where if you go out of state and get an abortion and come back, you're still guilty.
Hmm. Okay, I haven't read the whole law. Does Texas? Is there any? Well, Texas can't sue somebody in New Mexico.
Exactly. Right.
You know,
Right.
so yeah.
So I just wanted to. We'll come. I'm sure that'll come up later in the discussion, but that's a very important part
Okay,
to
but
acknowledge.
here's the question. Here's the question. Um, the doctor's responsible, and as you listen on the news, and they make a big point out of that. You know, if the Uber driver is taking you to an abortion clinic, the Uber driver can be part of the prosecution. True.
That's not the way the law reads, and we'll get to it in a minute. The way the law
Okay.
reads is it's referring specifically to the operation itself, and
Okay.
we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got this right. The woman can't be.
She
A
can't be
woman can
sued.
never
Right.
be guilty here. The woman can
Right.
never be at fault. All right, limitations on public enforcement. Now, this is what you were talking about earlier, where it's put more on the citizen than,
Yeah.
This specifically prohibits, so no enforcement of this subchapter and no enforcement of Chapter 19 and 22 Penal Code in response to violations of this subchapter may be taken or threatened by the state,
Okay,
a
I'm lost. Hold on. Where you at?
right,
Okay, I got
right
it.
here.
Okay.
Yeah, none of these actions can be taken by the state, a political subdivision, a district, a court attorney, an executive or administrative officer or employee of the state, or a political subdivision against any person, except as provided in 171-208.
So what does 171-208 say?
That gives you, we'll get to it in a minute. Right now we're on
Okay.
207. But
Okay.
the importance here is that the state of Texas is not going to be the one saying, they're not going to be the ones going to these clinics and saying this and everything. The function of this law seems to be that it gives people grounds for a lawsuit,
Yeah.
and the state itself will take no action. The
Okay. And
state
that's where the Supreme Court was having trouble because the Supreme Court can't act unless they're acting against the state of Texas, and the state of Texas seems to have written themselves out of the.
Yeah, they've written themselves out of enforcement of the subchapter. But
Exactly.
if the Supreme Court disagrees with the subchapter, then they can act. So that's the difference there. The state is saying that they are not going to go out and make these charges,
Yeah.
and the Supreme Court can, if it disagrees with the subchapter, can take its own action.
Yeah.
So that's what's really wild here, and why this law gets so much interest on my end, and why I'm fascinated by it is because you could get an abortion, so a woman could get an abortion at 4 months in front of an officer of the law in Texas, and they can't do anything about it.
That they can't do anything to the woman, but they could probably
No, they
stop.
can't. They can't do anything. They
They
can't
can't-
even bring the charges. That's the difference here. The charges have to be brought by someone else. The charges
Okay,
have to be
so-
brought by a non-representative of the state or any governmental body, essentially.
So basically, if I decided I wanted to be a pro-life advocate, I could park out in front of a doctor who I knew did abortions, and if I see somebody walk in and then they walk out, I could reasonably assume that maybe they got an abortion,
You
and then I could bring charges.
you
you're
could
saying.
you could start the lawsuit. Yeah,
Yeah.
and this act gives you legal grounds to start the lawsuit, and that's where that.
It's a little,
Yeah, it is weird, but see,
it's a little hinky.
there's no this doesn't say that you bring the lawsuit, you win. What this says is you can start the lawsuit, and then it could be
Yeah.
found that you're wrong.
Okay.
It could be
And
found.
also, it also says that if you start the lawsuit, I thought I saw that if you start the lawsuit, you'll get paid for your legal fees, but
On-
the person who's defending themselves won't get paid.
only if you
Is that
win.
true?
You only
I
get
thought it
paid
was-
if you win.
I thought it was win or lose. That's what I heard.
No,
but
it's only if you win. Yeah, so let's say the hypothetical situation, you're parked outside an abortion clinic and you say, okay, you just have a particular suspicion. This woman was 4 months pregnant and she got an abortion, whatever. It's like that's what you think happened.
Yeah.
You can bring that lawsuit, but only in the case that you win do your legal fees get reimbursed, and that's in the way of this $10,000 thing only. But we'll get to that in a minute. That's like the very next section from here. Okay, so here's the.
Wait, hold on for a second. Okay, I'm back. I got to ask a favor.
Mm-hmm.
I've got stuff I got to do, and it's going to take me away for about a half hour or so. Can we continue this tomorrow?
Yeah, we can. It's
or whenever's easy for you.
Yeah, we can continue it later.
Okay, and this is not me saying I'm mad because your logic is better and I'm stuck in the corner.
Not.
No, this is really good. I like this, and like I said, I'm learning stuff too. So
this is going to be a good part to discuss here.
Yeah. Okay.
So I just want to say this right quick before you go. Just so that you can be thinking about it. This is the part on aiding and abetting. This is where you're talking about somebody that just drives another person.
Okay, the partner in the greenish, the bluish, yeah.
So this is, an officer or employee of the state government or local entity of the state may bring a civil action against any person who. So any person other than, that's the important part there. No officer or employee of the state or local government or anything can bring a civil action against anybody who performs or induces an abortion in violation of the subchapter, knowingly engages in conduct that aids and abets the performance or inducement of an abortion, including paying for the reimbursement or reimbursing the cost of the abortion. So the way that this is worded, or at least the way it sounds to me, is that maybe the anesthesiologist, the surgeon, anybody like that, but then also including the person that pays for it, could be action brought against them by somebody other than local government of the state.
So you're basically saying it will be a Texanistan stretch to sue the Uber driver, right?
Absolutely. I do not read this as being. I think if somebody tried to sue an Uber driver, it would be thrown out as soon as it.
Yeah, I would hope. Yeah.
This doesn't read that way to me.
Okay.
So then 3 intends to engage in the conduct described. So if he's got like if she's got like a medical appointment to have it done beyond that, then you could say that they're planning to do it.
Right.
If the claimant prevails, here's the word. If the claimant prevails in action brought against under this action, the court shall award. And this is where we get to that $10,000.
Yeah.
So this is if the claimant prevails in an action brought under this section. Not just that he starts it. So somebody can't just run across Texas and start a bunch of lawsuits and get $10,000.
It can't be frivolous. Yeah, you got to be able to win this.
You have to win the lawsuit.
Okay.
So I think that's a good point to stop if you need to go. That we've reached the point where we can say, okay, the woman is never guilty of anything here.
Yeah.
The surgeon is, if they do it beyond 6 weeks, it's not a medical emergency, and the only person that can bring action against them is a non-representative of the state or local government.
Yep.
And this law gives them the civil basis to do that.
Okay. And one good thing about what we've just done here, neither one of us has thrown up, the woman can do anything she wants. It's God's will not to. We're talking about law. No, really, this is a good discussion,
Yeah, so. It'll be. I think what I'd like to do next time or tomorrow or the next day, or whenever you want to finish this, is once we get to the end of this, then we can really discuss our own beliefs and what we, our own personal opinions on the matter. But I think already at this point, we've dispensed with a lot of nonsense floating around.
A lot of Texanistan,
yeah. We've already dispensed with a lot of nonsense floating around about it. Okay. But yeah, we'll plan on doing it, finishing it up.
We can do it tomorrow or Friday if you want. Okay, I'm normally here in the house after 7 my time, so it shouldn't be any problem,
Friday may be the best.
Okay.
But I'll talk with Mary, make sure she doesn't have anything for me to do.
Okay, well, you'll see me on Facebook, so just put on there, Brett, next meeting is at this day at this time, so I'll get it.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Thank you for doing this. This is really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
It's
This
really
this
cool.
it's enjoyable so far.
Uh,
We'll definitely try to finish this later. So,
okay.
all right, we'll talk to you later then.
Good night, sir.
Night night.
Have a good one.
Okay. So yeah, there's really only two more things to discuss, and that would be uh, there's one part where it talks about ex-boyfriends, rapists, and different people like
Oh,
that
dude. Okay.
not being able to uh, raise these charges against the doctor. And
Okay.
let's see.
That makes
So
sense.
let me do the screen share thing again here.
Okay.
Okay, that way. All right, can you see it?
That's up. Yeah.
All right. So we had just kind of touched on this part. We were talking about the aids and abets, and
Yeah.
to me, this all seems to be referring specifically to the abortion surgery itself.
The
That's
provider, not the woman. Yeah.
right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
this is the aiding and abetting part. This is why I think it's a little bit overreach to say that the Uber driver would
Yeah.
be at
Well,
fault here.
that was the way it's been
The way it's
told
been
on
pushed
TV. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
it's not really being told. It's kind of like it's like the old thing. Well, do you want this to happen? Type of question, as opposed to like a factual. Here's what's
yeah,
happening. You know. So
yeah. So I've definitely heard that said a lot of times
yeah.
too. But yeah, so knowingly engages in conduct that aids and abets the performance or inducement of the abortion. To me, that seems to narrow it down to the
That's
people
the
actually doing.
doctor and the staff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then it has to, it adds at the end here. This is the only other part that comes into it is the including paying for or reimbursing the cost of an abortion through insurance or otherwise. So this is like if somebody were to pay for it for her to have it,
If I
then
pay a woman to have an abortion, then I'm part of the.
yeah, if you pay
Yeah.
if you pay the doctor, if you pay
Yeah.
for the actual surgery itself,
Okay, but
then
it says
yeah,
through insurance or otherwise. Are they really going to try to? I don't know if there's abortion insurance or not. I just don't know. But
right.
uh, they're not going to go after insurance companies, are they?
No, no. This seems to be about the individual, that someone that knowingly engages in this conduct. But that's of course, open for interpretation. This to me seems to be the doctor and staff, like you're saying.
Yeah.
That seems to be what this is referring to.
That seems
Um,
reasonable.
yeah, and then this part was what we. Where was the other part?
Did we cover
If
that yesterday?
if a claimant prevails, this is the very last thing we talked about.
Okay.
If a claimant prevails in action
Yeah.
brought under
Right.
this
Okay,
section.
yeah.
So
Hmm.
if somebody actually starts this lawsuit against the doctor, whoever it is, and they win that court battle, then this other stuff happens.
Yeah.
Injunctive relief sufficient to prevent the defendant from violating the subchapter of blah blah blah. So that's the injunctive relief sufficient to prevent the defendant from violating this subchapter or engaging in acts that aid and abet violations of this subchapter. The court shall
Oh,
award.
hold on. If the claimant prevails, so if the claimant wins the lawsuit,
Mhm.
the court shall award injunctive relief sufficient to prevent the defendant from violating the subchapter. So, what is effective relief, and how does that?
Injunctive relief.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I sue my girlfriend for getting an abortion
Well, you'd be suing
and
her doctor.
her doctor, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, and I win,
Mm.
how does injunctive relief prevent the defendant? The defendant is the doctor. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Right. Right.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I wasn't thinking. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So then the second part here is statutory damages in the amount not less than $10,000 for each abortion that the defendant performed or induced in violation of this subchapter. So if you win the lawsuit, then if it was found, it seems to be worded here, if it was found that this person performed several abortions in violation of the subchapter, you would get awarded this $10,000 more than once. That's the way it seems. But
Okay, well, it says for each, so it could be
yeah,
one or two or three or more.
right,
I don't think it's like tied into. It's got to be more than one.
right,
But
right.
yeah,
And then you have number 3, costs and attorney's fees. Notwithstanding subsection B, a court may not award relief under this section in response to a violation of subsection A. The defendant demonstrates that the defendant previously paid the full amount of statutory damages. This is going to get a little sticky legal wording here. I'm trying to figure out exactly what this says.
The court may not award relief under the section in response to a violation if the defendant demonstrates that the defendant previously paid the full amount. So I guess they're saying they're not going to charge it twice.
Yeah, they can't be sued twice. Yeah, that seems to be,
probably for the same abortion, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could be sued for this abortion and that abortion and that abortion, but I guess it's kind of like a double jeopardy, I guess.
Right here, B2, in a previous action for that particular abortion performed or induced in violation of this subchapter, or for a particular conduct that aided and abetted. So it seems to be it's kind of like a double jeopardy thing here. Is that you can't charge twice.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding Chapter 16, Civil Practice and Remedies Code. It seems like a lot of this just got into a lot of legal jargon when I read it.
Lawyers write this stuff up so that, ordinary people, we can't stop it without another lawyer who can read this stuff and say what they meant.
Right. Right. So this part here is kind of interesting. As notwithstanding any other law, the following are not a defense to an action brought under this section. So you can't plead ignorance or mistake of the law.
Yeah.
In other words, you can't just say you didn't understand.
Yeah.
You can't plead that a defendant's belief that the requirements of this subchapter are unconstitutional or were unconstitutional.
So the doctor can't say you're violating my constitutional rights to do this.
Right. That's not considered a defense to Texas. It could be at Supreme Court level, but that's not considered a defense to Texas.
I'm sure they'll look at that. So.
A defendant's reliance on any other court decision that may have been overruled or appealed. Defendant's reliance on state, federal court decision that not So this seems to be a lot of that referencing other cases and stuff. I don't know if it would be too useful of our time to dig into that.
That's like on Law and Order, you can't do that. Well, Smith versus Jones, 1932 says I can, so they're throwing that out the window. So
right.
Okay.
So let's bypass some of this. I don't know if that's going to be too beneficial. This part was really interesting, and I highlighted it so I made sure we didn't miss it.
Okay.
Notwithstanding any other law, a civil action under this section may not be brought to a person who impregnated the abortion patient through an act of rape, sexual assault, incest, or any other act by sections 2200. So these people, the people who raped or committed sexual assault, incest, I'm not sure why sexual assault and rape is separate there, but
probably lawyer definition. I don't know.
Yeah. So a civil action may not be brought by. So this is saying these people.
The rapist can't sue.
Right. The rapist can't sue. If it's an incest case, then the other family member can't sue and stuff. That was kind of interesting. I thought needed to be pointed out as we were going down through here.
Sure.
Civil liability, undue burden defense, a defense. This one gets kind of weird to think about, and I'm not sure that I understand this one completely. But undue burden defense limitations: a defendant against whom an action is brought. So that's the surgeon,
the doctor,
the surgeon. Let's say, does not have standing to assert the rights of women seeking an abortion as a defense to liability under that section, unless.
It sounds like, just reading what you just said, it sounds like a doctor gets sued for the abortion. The doctor can't go in court and say, you can't sue me because Roe v. Wade.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what I felt was, So then, unless the United States Supreme Court holds that the court of the state must confer standing on that defendant to assert third-party rights of the woman seeking an abortion. So it's opening it has to leave the door open for the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
The defendant has standing to assert. We talked about that yesterday, where you were questioning whether or not the Supreme Court could get involved in these cases, and
Yeah.
if they did, it would be on that grounds, like Roe v. Wade grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And this is exactly the door through which they would go in.
Yeah, because they can't go after the people who prosecute, because that's not really the state.
Right.
Because the state's not bringing the case to the court.
Right.
Private persons bring the case to the court, so they can't sue the private. Back up. I'm sorry. The Supreme Court can't legislate that the private person can't do that.
Right.
And start the process. But once the process gets started over different cases,
right.
I'm going to guess that some lawyer is going to take a look at all these cases, and if the lawyer finds some kind of violation, the lawyer will say something like, well, this, and this happened, and it appears that they're in violation of this, and this.
Right.
And then the Supreme Court can jump in, and they can, probably the Supreme Court will say something like, it is in violation, therefore the Texas law is no good, or it's not in violation, therefore we can't make a decision.
My guess is that if the Supreme Court found that these lawsuits can't hold, is that the lawsuits would quit being brought. Because the only time that, like, if I'm raising this lawsuit against the surgeon, that's coming out of my pocket until that lawsuit is successful.
Right.
And if the Supreme Court shows that this doesn't hold up to the Supreme Court, then every case after that will go to Supreme Court and they'll all get shot down. Mm-hmm. And then it's not worth anybody's time anymore. Now it's just a waste of money.
And then the state of Texas won't be able to do anything, because the law relies on civilians bringing the cases to court.
Exactly.
So if the Supreme Court reviews data and says that people can't bring these cases to Texas court, then the law has no legs.
It can stay a law, but nobody's going to do it, because then they're just paying money out of pocket to get it shot down in the end. So this is a very interesting part to realize. So the idea that a lot of people have pushed that the Supreme Court can't get involved is this right here is where they can. This is the door through which they would get involved. Yeah,
the news that I heard about the Supreme Court was that the law was written weird enough that, like you said, the Supreme Court's going to have to sneak in another door instead of just walking in the front door.
Right.
But, I mean, they can still rule on it, but it's kind of like, again, on Law and Order. You can't ask them that question. Well, he opened the door. He said this, so now I can ask questions about this.
Right.
If Supreme Court is going to have somebody open the door for them so they can come in and judge, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and that seems to be the role this plays right here.
Yeah.
All right, so let's keep going. These are other situations in which, other cases of undue burden defense limitations.
Okay.
The defendant has standing to assert the third-party rights of the woman group seeking an abortion in accordance with subsection and... Oh, wait, this is 1 and 2 of Part B. Okay. Just going to have to read a little slower here.
Okay.
A defendant in an action brought under Section 171-208, that's the main abortion law, may assert an affirmative defense to liability under this section if the defendant has standing to assert the third-party rights of a woman or group of women seeking abortion in accordance with the subsection, and the defendant demonstrates that the relief sought by the claimant will impose undue burden on that woman, or that the woman or that group of women seeking an abortion. So that's kind of interesting.
What are they trying to say there?
If it can be shown that the relief sought by the claimant will impose undue
not
burden,
the woman, but the
claimant, the one raising the lawsuit,
right?
Will impose an undue burden on that woman or that group of women seeking an abortion. I don't know how that would be the case, except that someone decides to just do this for a living, right? If this is um, if because I tried to imagine where this would apply, and I imagine if these cases are successful and people are getting awarded this much, then I could totally see people just being like bounty hunters and going and finding these places,
Yeah, yeah,
streamlining the court process and getting to where they can win as many of these lawsuits as they can.
yeah.
And in that way, then causing some kind of undue burden on women that get abortions or that are seeking abortion. I'm not sure.
That's the bounty hunter clause, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
That's yeah,
It seems to be something like that, and that
yeah.
certainly is up to interpretation. But that's what that seems to be. A court may not file an undue burden under subsection. Okay. Unawarded relief will prevent a woman or group from obtaining abortion. Okay, so that's what that gets into. A court may not file an undue burden under subsection B unless the defendant introduces evidence providing that an award of relief will prevent a woman or group of women from obtaining an abortion. A court may not find an undue burden under subsection B unless the defendant introduces evidence proving that an award of relief will prevent a woman or a group of women from obtaining an abortion. So there's some.
Are they saying that I'm getting the vibe that they're saying, will the relief prevent the woman from getting the abortion? So if I sue, then the result, I guess, has to be that the woman won't get an abortion,
Okay.
as opposed to she already got it and I'm suing.
Yeah. So one of the things that we were reading yesterday was that if you have a plan to get an abortion, this lawsuit can also be raised. If you can show this, she was going to have this abortion, maybe that's what this is referring to. That if in the end, if this lawsuit is victorious, it will prevent her from obtaining an abortion.
Yeah.
Then it will be viewed as undue burden, and then it gets dismissed. So that may be how that's used. That could be.
That's why I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's skip. We definitely can't with confidence speak about that legal jargon.
Yeah.
I can see we definitely don't have the expertise to talk about that.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
Civil liability venue, notwithstanding. Okay, that doesn't matter. That's just where these lawsuits are held, the courts and county municipal offices. We don't need any of that.
Here's a question, because we're talking about sovereign government. Okay. A lady's in Texas. She wants to get an abortion. She drives to New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
She gets an abortion. She comes back. She's got a license plate saying, I got an abortion in New Mexico, up yours. This law really can't touch her, can it?
No, that's
okay, and it can't touch. It can't touch the people in New Mexico either.
Mm-hmm. No, because this is a law just about what happens in Texas.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why this law is so interesting to me. The way that this thing is put together is really interesting.
What they don't realize, though, I'm not a doctor, obviously, but if I'm an abortion doctor, if I specialize, if I do abortions, and this law is up, and I know if I do an abortion, I can be prosecuted, I'm going to get some property right at the border of Texas and New Mexico, or Texas and Louisiana, or whatever state.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna open an abortion clinic.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that's going to happen. It's when you get on like I-40, or let's say 421, and you're headed towards Tennessee. As soon as you cross the Tennessee line, there's fireworks places everywhere because the real fireworks aren't legal in North Carolina. So I imagine it'll be something very similar to that. On the other side of the border. So let's get an idea of what's going on here. We're almost through the part that we care about. Sovereign governmental and official immunity preserved. This section prevails over Uniform Declarative Judgment Act since Chapter 37, Subsection Remedies. provision of
Sounds
state
like
law.
they're getting the politicians out of it. They're saying the
Yeah.
politicians are immune to it, so they can't be part of the
Yeah, because
process.
they can't raise the charges.
Right.
So my guess is that this section is probably exists in about every law out there.
Yeah.
And it says, we just passed the law. You can't sue us for
Mm,
making
right. Exactly. Yeah.
it. You know,
Exactly.
I think this probably exists in every law.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially though with this law, because if if the politicians are part of the process, then the Supreme Court has an easier door to come into, I guess, you know.
right, right.
Yeah.
And that's they come into it back here too. Um, mindful of Leviat versus Jane. I'm not sure what that is, what that case is.
It's some case, but I'll
Yeah.
look it up later.
The severability of a state statute regulating abortion in the United States Supreme Court held that an explicit statement of legislative intent is controlling. It is the intent of the legislature that every provision, section, subsection, sentence, clause, phrase, or word in this chapter, and every application of the provisions in this chapter are severable from each other. So that's sort of, I imagine that probably exists in a lot of laws too. That
Yeah.
if some kind of conflict is discovered, that they can separate these things from each other.
Mm.
That could certainly be the case there. That may exist. I've seen that language in other laws that I've read.
Yeah.
If any applicability or provision of this chapter to any person, groups, person, the remaining applications of that provision and all other persons' circumstances shall be severed and may not be. Okay, there's not a lot for us to talk about there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, the only other thing that I wanted to talk about, notwithstanding any other law, this is that award of attorney's fees in actions challenging abortion laws.
Yeah.
So, any person, including an entity, attorney, or law firm who seeks declaratory or injunctive relief to prevent this state, a political subdivision, or any government or political office of the state, or any person in the state from enforcing any statute, ordinance, rule, regulation, or any other type of law that regulates or restricts abortion, or that limits taxpayer funding for individuals or entities to perform or promote abortions in any state, federal court, or that represents any litigant seeking seeking such relief from the state, federal court is jointly and severally liable to pay the cost of the attorney fees of the prevailing party. State or federal court is jointly. For purposes of this section, a party is considered a prevailing party if the state or federal court dismisses any claim. Okay, this is going to be existing in a lot of this, under a lot of laws too. This is like saying that if you challenge a state law and you win, you don't have to pay the legal fees.
Mm.
So let's skip that.
Yeah.
Construction of abortion statutes. A statute that regulates or prohibits abortion may not be construed to repeal any other statute. Okay, so they're saying that this law doesn't dismantle any other laws.
Yeah.
It just exists in its own. Okay. Commission Department to enforce exceptions. Shall enforce this chapter except for subchapter H, which shall be enforced exclusively through private civil actions described by section 171.208. That's the abortion law itself. And this is that sort of reiterating only through private civil enforcement is any of that done.
Right.
Let's see. Health and safety laws is amended as follows. Okay. Here's the last thing I want to talk about in the law, and then we'll just sort of have a discussion about what we're our opinions on it. So, of course, if an abortion is performed or induced or on a pregnant woman because of a medical emergency, the physician who performs or induces the abortion shall execute a written document that certifies the abortion is necessary due to a medical emergency and specifies the woman's medical condition requiring the abortion. Here's what's interesting here is that there's no challenge to this. That it doesn't say that they have to submit this to a reviewing committee that then decides if it's a medical emergency.
Okay, but just the language, it says the physician who performs or induces the abortion shall execute a written document. Somebody's going to get the document.
But see, the problem is that as far as this law goes, it doesn't say that that's submitted for approval. So what I'm getting at is if the physician decides, like we were talking about yesterday, that she's too young to be pregnant, then he can state that in his legal statement and says she's just too young. this is a risk to her life, and declare it a medical emergency. And this law doesn't allow for anyone to challenge that. They leave that authority in the hands of the surgeon.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. It's up to him or her, whoever the surgeon is, to decide if it's a medical emergency or not. And then it has, maintaining a copy of the document and everything. Abortion is performed to induce or preserve the health of the pregnant woman. Execute a written document that specifies a medical condition the abortion is asserted to address, and blah, blah, blah. So this is sort of like them saying, you're going to document everything about why you think it's necessary.
Yeah.
Now, here is what I think to be the next part here. We're almost to it. This is just listing all of the stuff they'll include in that document.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, see, all this stuff that, he's going to read that she has rights to different things, that the physician performed is induced. We don't need to go into too much detail there. All right. This seems to be the waiver that the woman then fills out. If this is the case, if the doctor's saying, okay, this is a medical necessity, we're going to do this abortion. This seems to be the waiver that comes along with that. It's in that subsection. The problem is, so like right here, just the part just before it, before receiving a sonogram under subdivision, blah, 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 and before the abortion is performed or induced, or before any sedative or anesthesia is administered, the pregnant woman completes and certifies with her signature an election form that states as follows. So this is the waiver that I was telling you about yesterday. The information the printed materials described as Texas Health Safety Code have been provided and explained to me. So there will be some type of disclosure she'll have to read.
Yeah.
I understand the nature and consequences of an abortion. Texas law requires that I receive a sonogram prior to receiving an abortion. I understand that I have the option to view the sonogram images. I understand that I have an option to hear the heartbeat. So we know that this waiver has to do with something after the heartbeat is detected.
Yeah.
I understand that I am required by law to hear an explanation of the sonogram images unless, so she doesn't have to hear an explanation of the sonogram image, unless I certify in writing to one of the following. I am pregnant as a result of sexual assault, incest, or other violation of the Texas Penal Code that has been reported to law enforcement authorities, or that has not been reported to law that has not been reported because I reasonably believe that doing so would put me at risk of retaliation resulting in serious bodily injury. They have to put that part because a lot of women are afraid to report their attacker.
Oh yeah.
So they have to put that in there. So there was a misunderstanding here too that I saw in the news where they were saying that this part, that a woman has to have then reported her rape. And that's not the case. That's what
the law clearly says, reported or unreported.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm a minor, so if she's a minor, that's this is one of the following. So she just has to certify one of the following. So a lot of people also said, well, if she's not a minor, then none of this applies. But this is one of the following.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to certify to all of the following, just one of the following. My unborn child has an irreversible medical condition or abnormality. That's also a reason that she can get this waiver filled out to get this.
Well, that would be beyond the heartbeat, though, because
that's beyond heartbeat. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm making this election of my own free will and accord without coercion.
And hold on. The woman has to check one of these things.
Yeah.
So if she says, I'm making this election of my own free will and without coercion, she's saying, I want to get an abortion, and that's my reason for getting it.
Oh, no, I think, so these parts here before 7, this is the one of these things. See, just the one of these things is just part 6.
Okay.
So see 6, where it says pick one of the following, that ends right here. And then 7.
Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay.
Then 7, she's just agreeing that she's making this decision of her own free will and accord.
Right. Whatever she did up here, it's her free will. Yeah, okay, I've got it.
And then 8, for a woman who lives this is kind of interesting. For a woman who lives 100 miles or more from the nearest abortion provider that is a facility licensed under Chapter 245 Texas Health and Safety Code, or a facility that performs more than 50 abortions in any 12-month period only.
Mm.
For a woman who lives 100 miles or more. So this is a statement about people who don't live near an abortion clinic.
Yeah.
I certify that because I currently live 100 miles or more from this abortion clinic, and it gets into all that details again. I waive the requirement to wait 24 hours after the sonogram is performed before receiving the abortion.
So that's
So
a logistics thing. That's all that is.
yeah, it seems like that probably exists in another law that women have to see the sonogram and they can't get an
Yeah.
abortion until 24 hours has passed.
Yeah.
If she lives
That takes the undue burden off of her,
right,
because she's got to get to the place. Then you're going to make her stay there for another day.
right. So
I
that
can
takes
see
that
yeah.
off of her, yeah.
Yeah.
And then she puts her address, I guess.
Right.
That is. So that's pretty much the end. Before the abortion is performed and induced, the physician who is performing this receives a copy. This is all logistic stuff. He receives a signed copy and written copy. The report must include whether the abortion facility the abortion is performed is licensed under this chapter. So that's like saying it has to be a place that knows what they're doing.
Yeah. Just can't go to a barber shop. Yeah.
Yeah. Patient's year of birth, race, marital status, and state, county of residence, the type of abortion procedure, the date the abortion was performed. Okay, that's all logistics.
Yeah.
Section 10, and then this is where everybody signs. So that's the end of it. That's the whole law. All right. So let's talk about it.
So now it clear it. What we just did lets me see what can and cannot happen as far as somebody requesting an abortion. Okay. And it again, we got rid of the Uber driver being prosecuted and the woman being flogged in City Square and all this other. So that's the law. I'm not a lawyer, but the law seems to cover everything they want to cover.
Right. Yeah. So the opinion that I've got on this law, because I tried to read a lot of them, and I know there's a lot of that legal language I didn't understand, but this one was really interesting to me when I started looking into it. And based on what we were talking about yesterday, if between
full disclosure, I'm not drinking beer.
I usually am. If you watch any of my discussions on religion, usually I'll go through a 6-pack during that discussion.
Yeah.
It's the only time I really drink. But yeah, so we were talking about yesterday. There's some point X between conception and delivery.
In life.
Yeah, but between conception and delivery, there's some point in there that life happens.
Yeah.
Now, and we both agree that the left and the right seems to keep their foot on the brake as far as clarifying that.
They're yards apart.
Yeah, and they don't want any progress made.
No,
the left and the right
because
doesn't seem to want any progress.
They're stuck in their opinion. They don't want to.
Yeah.
Any give they see, left or right, extreme left or extreme right. I think any give that they get, any compromise or any consideration that they give to the other side, they figure is seen as weakness and that their side is not valid.
Right.
So, it's kind of like eat your vegetables and you get a whole plate full of vegetables. And you say, well, that's too many to eat, but vegetables are good for you, so you got to eat them all.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense. I saw something today, excuse me, and it was something that was talked about with other people. There was the kid in Minnesota, I think it's Minnesota, a kid was shot, back up. In Minnesota, a kid was stopped by the police. He was tackled to the ground. He was handcuffed, and they gave him a tranquilizer shot. Okay, the paramedics gave him a shot to calm him down. According to the news, they gave him too much, because it's a body weight regulated shot.
They probably had to visually estimate.
Yeah,
body weight.
But anyway, they gave him too much, and the kid died as a result. Okay, back up. The kid was in the hospital for a couple of days, and then the hospital said he's brain dead, and then they disconnected him.
Mm-hmm.
So, is brain activity part of life?
Well, so then it would depend on what you classify as brain activity, right? So
Exactly, exactly. And again,
the
I'm no doctor. I don't know.
yeah, so the heart doesn't fire without the neural impulses from the brain. So the muscles don't activate without those nerves being active. In my opinion, that you have some kind of neural activity in the body before the heart starts beating.
Okay, but here's the deal. Okay, well, this guy, his heart was beating and his brain was dead. So somebody could argue that you could be without a brain and still have a heartbeat.
That so when they said brain dead, they mean is his brain is actually not doing anything. Like they could sever it and
It was medically, whatever medical brain death is, but I'm assuming that medical
okay,
brain death is there's no activity in the brain. Again, I'm assuming now. Okay,
right,
there's no activity in your brain. You flash lights at somebody's eyes, and the pupils are fixed and dilated. That type of thing.
okay. Yeah,
So I mean,
I don't know
yeah,
enough about that, but I don't think that the heart, unless it was on some kind of like a pacemaker, something to make the heart beat. I don't I don't know that the heart beats without the brain. But
that's a good point because
yeah,
okay, he was on a ventilator,
yeah, that's
so
that
he,
forcing air
he
into his lungs.
yeah. I don't know. I have no information on if he was on some kind of a heart stimulator or not.
Yeah,
So I don't know. Yeah,
yeah, that's an interesting question. I've never thought about that. And
yeah,
I don't know the ins and outs of what it means to be brain dead.
yeah. And again, that's part of where this line is going to be drawn. Where
Yeah.
you know,
So it
yeah,
seems to me that at some point the left and the right are going to have to be forced to decide where this point is.
yep. And it should
And
be a medical decision, I think,
yeah, it should be a medical
because
decision. Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
because the medical people, they know a lot more than Lindsey Graham or Maxine Brown or Maxine Waters. I'm sorry, because they're doctors. They
right.
and they've got. If I'm a doctor and I make a statement about what is life, it's going to be reviewed by other doctors,
Hmm.
and they should say, well, this makes sense, or this makes sense, but, or it doesn't make sense, whatever. But
So
as opposed to that's the way I feel about it.
I've heard an
So
argument before that was pretty convincing that the point at which the uh, the body of the baby can be taken from the mother and it still be viable and live.
that's to me that's life.
That's yeah. So,
Easily, that's easily life. Yeah.
but let's say for example, let's make up a week state. Let's say 20 weeks. Let's say it can be shown with confidence that a baby can survive outside the womb at 20 weeks.
That's 4 months.
Can be removed. Yeah, yeah. I'm just
Okay.
just as
Yeah,
a
okay.
as a
That
hypothetical. Yeah,
okay. I could see that as reasonable without me doing any research because 4 months you got stuff going on
right.
and you might be able to pull the baby out and keep the baby viable. I don't know, but for 1 week or 2 weeks, to me that's just a clump of cells.
Yeah, yeah. I agree completely.
20
Yeah,
20 weeks, you know, you can sonogram that and see that there's a baby in there.
yeah.
I mean, it's obvious that there's something going on. You sonogram somebody a week after intercourse and
Right,
nothing. So
right.
uh, uh
Um,
so
so
yeah,
you would
20,
say
20 weeks is good.
so for you, if it could be shown, that a baby can survive outside the womb at so many weeks, then that for you would be enough to look at the legislation on abortion and say it could revolve around that? Or are you against any legislation on abortion?
Here's my problem. Okay, I don't feel comfortable telling somebody something about if I can tell a woman she can't get an abortion, then I definitely can tell somebody you will get a COVID shot because you're talking about life. You're talking about the preservation of life and the that arena. Um, I don't I don't feel comfortable telling somebody that they must get a COVID shot. I rely on their ability to think and rational processes and morality and all this other, and they'll get one. That's what I think. Okay. In the same token, I rely on the woman to not get an abortion unless there's something more than backup. At 2 weeks, a woman can say, I can't afford a baby, I can't raise a baby, and get an abortion. I wouldn't feel any problem with that.
Right.
At 20 weeks, if the lady says, well, my boyfriend or my husband just left and I got to get rid of this baby, although I personally wouldn't write legislation against that, I wouldn't support her decision. You know, if given a chance, given a chance, I'd try to talk her out of it. And it wouldn't be like, well, I have the right to do it. Well, yeah, you've got the right to do it, but is that really the right thing to do? Is it really necessary? Are there
Right.
other, can you give the baby up for adoption? Can you, because you're talking about life here, but
So
I don't, go ahead.
so if we reach that point beyond which we say, okay, this is a life that's in
20
her.
weeks.
Yeah. So then,
Just arbitrarily.
yeah. So just arbitrarily we say 20 weeks. So let's say she reaches that 20 weeks point and says, okay, this is a life inside of her. And if there's no legislation, do you feel that she has the right to take that life?
I wouldn't support it. If I knew somebody was 20 weeks along, whether she was like 18 years old and her boyfriend left her, or whether she's like 40 years old and it's a surprise pregnancy, I couldn't support, I could support her reasons like, I can't afford it, I don't have time, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I can agree with that. But I don't see that taking the life at 20 weeks or beyond is a reasonable solution to your problem.
But
You know,
how does that relate to her rights, though? Is what I'm getting at. Do you think it's her right to be able to take that life beyond that point?
that's a hard question.
Yeah, I know that's it.
It's really because
Yeah,
you're basically asking, does a woman have a right to kill her husband who always beats her, or I mean, not something like that. Um,
yeah. That'd be a little bit different situation because the baby's not beating her.
that's a hard question.
This is
I,
this, in my opinion, I think this is one of the big misunderstandings about a lot of the people that are pro-life is that they really do view at some point that's just taking a life, and they don't
yeah,
they don't feel that that the pregnant woman has the right to take the life of the child after some point.
well, that's true. Okay, and again, like using the extreme, at 2 weeks, it's a clump of cells. If the baby is 1 month from delivery, it's you got to be blind to see it's not a life.
Right.
Um, I can't. A woman has a right to do with her body what she wants to do because it's her body. But my personal opinion, I'm not talking about legal or anything. My personal opinion, the way I feel about it, is that a woman shouldn't do it, and there should be some kind of mechanism
Right.
to give her another choice
But
rather than abortion.
there's also another way to look at this. When you look at that statement, she should have a right to do with her body what she wants to do with her body. What at
Okay, but there was a but. She has
Yeah.
the right,
Yeah.
but, and that's a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
but.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
No,
yeah.
I get it. I get it. I get it. I'm just saying
Okay.
the once you pass that point where you say, okay, that's a life inside of her. Now it's a question of if she has the right to do something to that body.
Technically, and this is, excuse my language, this is a bullshit technicality. Okay,
Right.
but technically, since the law hasn't given anything inside of a body legal standing, as far as I know, they don't have a right to free speech, a right to this, a right to that. They have no rights. So technically,
Do you feel like a baby once it's born has more rights than a baby in the womb?
yeah, technically.
So,
Technically. Okay.
okay,
I mean, if I'm pulling out a law book, I can show you where this baby must be treated with
right,
these particular set of rules. And when we go to looking for those same rules or similar rules for a fetus, they're not there. So technically, the fetus doesn't have the right. Okay. That's the technicality. My personal opinion, my gut feeling, what makes me able to go to bed and not
right,
stay up all night is that, like you said, if the line is at 20 weeks,
hmm
yeah, if the line is at 20 weeks, although technically the woman has technical rights, I don't feel that it's the right thing to do. I wouldn't. If somebody came to me and said, you know, I'm 20 weeks, 30 weeks pregnant, but I can't deal with this baby. I don't have the money. Instead of pulling out the technicality of Arizona, you can get an abortion. I would try to get this person to agencies that she could carry the baby,
hmm
deliver the baby, and either keep the baby or put it up for
yeah,
adoption.
or receive
And
enough government aid that her concerns should dwindle.
or okay, or
Yeah,
if it was something like she couldn't afford the medical, I'd try to pay the medical if I had the money. Just you know,
yeah,
check the difference between tech. It's like the death penalty. Okay, technically the death penalty is available. Do I feel good about giving somebody the death penalty, even if they fit the technicality for the penalty? It's still a life,
right,
and I can't find anything in my background. And if you go to religion, I can't find anything in the New Testament because Christians deal with the New Testament. I can't find anything there that gives me the right to take a life. And again, I'm no scholar, but I would rather put the person in prison for life. Although
yeah.
I can't find any technicality in the Bible for that either. um,
Yeah,
um,
no, yeah, I definitely I agree there. I think
uh,
there's, with very few exceptions, there's been some really evil people
oh yeah,
that to exist that I think might create an exception.
I
But
could I think I could pull the trigger on Hitler myself.
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah. Um,
But
okay, so this is interesting. You said you brought up the technicality of it. So wouldn't you say that a lot of these laws are attempting to fix that? You're saying technically it's to you technically it's not a person with rights while it's in the womb. So isn't that essentially what a lot of these laws are trying to do? Is say, okay, let's change the laws, or where you say technically, and you keep referring to the technicality of it. A
yeah.
lot of these laws are trying to do is say we are going to act as though this is a
But see
person
that
that has
that they're
rights.
they're acting as if it is a person and they have no backup to do it with. They're somebody can look at this and they can say that's the way you feel, that's your personality, that's your religion, that's
hmm
your politics, whatever. I think a more efficient way to do this would be for the lawmakers to define life like we talked about. Is it 20 weeks? Is it 30 weeks?
Right.
Whatever. And at this point, say at the 20-week point, at the 30-week point, we consider the fetus as a person and we bestow upon the fetus all the rights
hmm
that a birth person has. And that ends it all.
Right.
Because, if somebody wants to get an abortion at the 21st week and the line has been set that life is at 20 weeks, now when the fetus dies, it's kind of like you killed your next door neighbor
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
you've given the rights, to the baby.
Yeah.
I've, I've got I've really got no problem with a reasonable medical opinion on when actually life is. Okay. And again, I'm trying to steer away from religion because religion can be extreme. I don't
Absolutely.
want I don't
Yeah.
want to go there. But as far as it'll be a lot easier. When does life start? The legislature says it's 20 weeks. Okay. I don't think that's right. We can take it to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court takes a look at it and they say, based on everything that's in this law, based on all the research, we stick with the law. We uphold the law. 20 weeks is it. At that point, the discussion is over. I can get an abortion up to 20 weeks, 21st week and beyond.
Okay.
I can't.
Yeah.
That would solve a lot of problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and again, that's what we were talking about yesterday was that, any effort made to clarify that point. So Texas has decided that for them, it's the moment there's a heartbeat.
Yeah.
They've just decided that's point X for them. But to reach a consensus between left and the right on what point X is impossible.
Well, see, that's why instead of talking to Maxine Waters and talking to Lindsey Graham and getting their opinion because they're not doctors, or even talking to Rand Paul, who's a doctor, but he's an eye doctor. This should be something. We've got commissions on everything. Why not get a commission on actually when does life begin as far as something reasonable?
I think a good solid way to start with that is at what point can this child be taken out of the womb and survive?
That could be that. Okay, if the child can be taken out of the womb, excuse me, and off the subject. I'm sorry, off the subject. I was raised. I went to Catholic schools. Okay, so you're 6 years old. You go to first grade. Catholic schools they pray, and because it's a religious school,
Hmm.
So we're saying the Hail Mary. Okay, and this Hail Mary, full of grace, Lord is with blah blah blah, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Now I'm a 6-year-old. Okay, I don't know if I'm bright or not, but for years I wondered what thy womb Jesus is. Because I didn't see the womb as a separate thing because I'm 6 years old. So like there must be a device out there called thy womb Jesus,
Right.
like
And he's providing fruit. He's
I
providing fruit somewhere. Yeah.
I was really confused. Yeah, but anyway, no. Back to the issue though. If a baby, I'd have trouble. If somebody asked me my opinion, and they pulled a fetus out of a woman at X date from conception, and the fetus survived, even if it was premature as it got older, didn't
even if it had to exist in the NICU for a little while.
And 10 years later, this fetus is now a member of society, and then that tells me that at X point, all things being equal, that's a life.
Yeah.
So my opinion would be that anything after X point, you can't mess with, whatever X point is.
Okay. Okay.
But again, that's my personal opinion. I'm not a doctor.
Right.
I don't even play one on TV, but I'm not a doctor.
Right. Well, one of the things I always try to point out when I sit down to have these discussions about religion is I say, look, we're both just philosophers here. We're both just going to have a discussion about philosophy and how our mind works around this and right and wrong.
Yeah.
That's all we're going to talk about is for us average people, what the right and wrong of this scenario is. And I think I'd probably agree with you on the way you've described it there. That after X point in the timeline, you can't touch that.
You can't touch it.
And that's, I think if they would clarify what X point is, that would be a good way to do it. So,
really, I would be. I don't believe in high pressure. Okay, but if X point is like 20 weeks, I wouldn't be upset if there was an agency that said, "Are you planning on having an abortion at 20 weeks? Let's talk about it." And give other options so that like maybe 2 weeks before the X, before you can't do it, you decide not to do it and you go past the 20 weeks and then you keep the baby,
Right. Right.
It's a touchy, and if we're here talking and women come in, we're like, we don't know what we're talking about. I mean, but we like you said, the X point, a determined X point I think would solve a lot of problems
Yeah.
because you can write laws about X plus. You
Yeah.
know,
But yeah,
if it's X, go
yeah,
ahead.
and that's what I think. Defining that point is what
Yeah.
neither side is going to let happen. Now, X,
Or it takes strength
yeah,
away from their argument.
yeah, Texas has decided that point X is 6 weeks,
Yeah.
and well, a
Oh no,
heartbeat,
heartbeat,
yeah.
heartbeat. Yeah.
Texas has decided that point is a heartbeat, and they say that's the signal of viability. That's the way they worded it in the law is that the
Uh-huh.
heartbeat signals viability. This is a viable fetus. This is that's they've decided that's X. So let's sort of
If,
just
if if medical people took a look at that, you know, unbiased medical people, and they took a look at it, and they say, although that is kind of early, we can't dispute that. The
right,
heartbeat is the start of life. Then the X point moves to the heartbeat
right,
because it's been medically determined as opposed to politically determined.
right,
And I got no problem with that.
right. So
Go ahead.
the last thing we'll do here is just final thoughts on this law in Texas, and so I'm going to give you my final thoughts on it, and then you give me
Okay.
your final thoughts. I think clearly it is being misrepresented in a lot of these
Oh yeah,
discussions.
yes,
I think
yes it
that's
is,
clear.
and
Um,
I'll admit that because
and
I was part of the
the
Texanistan.
Afghanistan
I
thing,
was
yeah,
I was part of that.
right. Um,
Yeah,
and in my opinion, I think because of the uniqueness of this law and how it protects the woman, it she's protected from any kind of legal recourse.
yeah,
Um, I think that this law is worth the experiment. Because
go
this
ahead.
law, I think it could get shut down by the Supreme Court. I think that's entirely possible. But in my opinion, I think as far as the abortion discussion goes, because it leaves the woman she has the ability to just go to another state, minus financial hardship,
She has the option. She might not have the ability.
right. She has the
Yeah,
option, but may not have the
correct.
ability to go to another state. She herself is protected from any kind of legal recourse,
Right.
and it also allows for medical conditions that would necessitate and everything, and that's where the rape, incest, things like that
Yeah.
come in.
Yeah.
It seems to allow for a lot of the things people are concerned about, and it keeps the Texas law enforcement, nobody can bring these charges except someone just raising a lawsuit. Well, all it is,
Right.
when you boil it down to its essence, what it seems to be is just the legal grounds for a lawsuit,
Yeah.
and that's all that it is. So that's my opinion on this law in Texas. I think it's worth the experiment. I think it could very likely fail, in which case back to the drawing board. But I
Yeah.
think to me it seems to be worth the experiment. So what's your thoughts?
Okay. My thought on this, and I'm getting close to Texanistan here with this comment,
Right.
but it's kind of like you've got rules for slavery. You know, here's what the master can't do. Here's what the master can do. The slave is protected. Slave doesn't get whipped. Whatever. Okay, but the slave is still a slave, and the law, no matter how fine it's written, can't resolve that. Slavery is the issue. Okay, the Texas law, I'm thinking it takes away the right of the woman to make a choice on her own without repercussion. And that's the part I don't like. Okay, that's the part I don't like, even though it protects the woman, and even though it allows certain things, I just feel that the woman should call the shots. Okay, and again, we're talking about the X line. If the X line is wherever it is, then the woman can call the shots up to the X line, and then beyond that, she's stuck with the legal. You can't
Sure.
commit murder.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm against the law because it directs somebody as to what they can and cannot do.
So,
Okay, and it doesn't answer the question about why somebody wants an abortion and how we can prevent the abortion, prevent the person from wanting an abortion. All it does is regulate the abortion industry.
mhm.
And okay, and that's if I'm into the morals of it, I don't want the abortion industry regulated. I want some kind of stuff out there that would reduce the need for an abortion industry.
Mhm.
So I'm a technically the law sounds good. Okay, if you could apply it, the wording of that law to anything other than somebody's right to do what they want to do,
Mhm.
I could accept it. Okay, and again, if we could get, here's where life starts, then
Yeah.
that rule is really unnecessary.
So
Okay, because if life starts at X and up to X, the person gets an abortion, we've already agreed that there's no life. Okay. If the person goes beyond X, we've already agreed that the fetus inside the womb that won't be delivered for another 4 months, maybe, has all the rights that you and I have. So you can't abort it, you know.
right.
Uh,
So really, it seems like part of your problem really is just where they put X.
it's easier. It's easier for me. It's easier, it takes away the argument. It just makes it a matter of fact. When does life start? It starts. We reasonably calculated that life starts at X.
Mm.
Okay, the doctors have agreed that people who are pro-abortion have agreed to it. People who are anti-abortion have agreed
That's
to it.
that. Well, those last two aren't going to happen.
I know, I know, I know.
You have to. Yeah.
If you get the extreme, it's never going to happen because they're
Yeah.
not going to talk to each
Yeah.
other.
But the medical
Yeah,
professionals thing, that's possible. The medical
yeah.
professionals thing. Yeah.
But if and I can see it like if John Hopkins or whoever it is, whatever medical professional comes out and says life begins here. So here is the point where it's not murder is hand up there. Not
Yeah.
murder is murder. Um, there's going to be people that are going to rally against that, but they're going to claim religion or something else. And this isn't about religion as I see it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about making a good call. Um, that should be if Texas really wanted to do something, Texas should get their medical people together from the hospitals, the different hospitals,
Mhm.
and have some kind of symposium and ask people to come in and discuss it. You know,
Right.
this is my opinion.
So
So
yeah. So that's why I say it seems like you agree that beyond X that
beyond X,
you don't touch
it's
that.
like
Right.
no, it's like they talk about third trimester abortions. Unless after the end of third trimester, if the fetus is causing harm to the mother to the point where the mother will die
Mm-hmm.
and possibly the fetus will die. Okay. I can't, I'm not King Solomon. I can't say which one gets to live and which one gets to die.
Right.
The woman, I'd go with that because she's here. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
just a choice. But it at the X point, say the X point is at 20 weeks, like you said.
Right.
Beyond X, unless there's a compelling reason, like the baby turned radioactive and you got to get the baby out of there,
Right.
okay, unless there's a compelling reason, the baby stays.
Yeah.
Okay. And if somebody says, well, we can abort after 20 weeks, after we decided that X is 20 weeks, then I'll go next door and I'll shoot my neighbor and kill her. And then when they bring me to trial, I'm going to say, well, we decided that life was at 20 weeks, but people are still killing them and you're letting them go. So why can't I kill my neighbor? Because we're talking about life here.
Exactly. Yeah.
We're not talking about seniority. We're just talking about
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
So,
So let's say.
but that's beyond. I don't get paid enough to do this.
Well, like I said, we're just philosophizing here.
Yeah,
We're just exploring our own thoughts.
yeah.
So let me throw this question out there right quick before, and then
Okay,
we'll
okay, and really quick because it's going to be a half hour. We're an hour and a half now.
sorry about that.
Oh no, it's a good conversation. So
Yeah.
let's
So just one more hypothetical. Okay, so
go ahead.
let's say that the medical professionals show that you can remove a baby from the womb at 20 weeks and it can survive outside the womb. This is this is the point that they've agreed is this is the point of
Life.
viability. The
Yeah.
fetus reaches this point. Now it's a baby. It's just an unborn child at that point.
Right.
Um, then looking at this law in Texas, let's say the heartbeat was moved to 20 weeks.
Yeah.
Do you have an issue with it then?
No.
Okay. So it
Because
that's what
because what you're doing is you made a law that says if you go beyond where we considered life,
yeah.
we get to go after you. And at that point, I'd have it so that instead of your neighbor turning in, the state can do it. Because the state, with the assistance of medical professionals, the state has determined that 20 weeks is life. So if
So
that's the case, then the 20-week fetus gets the same life protection that I get when somebody's
so
trying to shoot me for no reason.
so the reason why I asked that is that kind of gets at what I mean when I say that your real. It seems the real problem that you've got with this law is where they put X.
Yeah.
Because it seems like if you're convinced if they put X where you feel that medical professionals agree X should be, then there's not an issue that you have with this law.
I can't have an issue with the law that says after life begins, and
Right.
we've studied where life begins, and we've come to a consensus, and medical professionals have not 100% agreed, but the majority of medical professionals have said that 20 weeks is life. Then I can't get mad at a law that says we're going to protect a life once it's a life.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the issue is, where is the life? Is it heartbeat? Is it 20? That's something that medical
Right.
people do, you know.
So
And
I think
and let me cut you off here. I'd have no trouble with a law that would prohibit abortions because there's a law that prohibits me from committing murder. The
exactly.
same.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. But you'd have to have a solid, reasonable, unbiased, nonpartisan X that is determined,
Yeah. And I
So
think that could be derived. I think the hard data could be derived from, emergency C-sections, premature deliveries that can show we could show with that data, where children have survived after being removed from the womb. You could
I'm going to
show
guess it. The
you
medical people should have all that stuff, and they should
yeah,
say, based, like you said, based on this, that, and other thing.
yeah you
Here's
could
the point.
you could say X is at least this early.
Yeah,
You don't you're not going
or
to
this
be
late.
or this Well, I say at
Yeah.
least this early because you couldn't really say you're not going to force operations to happen where they're taking the baby out before that. But the earliest known of example where a baby can be taken out and survive outside the womb, then you could start to compile that data. You could
Okay.
come up with a number and say, okay, it's at least here. And
Yeah, and again, when the medical people do that, I would assume that they'd have like a very early, it starts, but data would say that this is a rarity. It doesn't represent the real deal. The no doubt X is here.
right,
This is
right.
like, if you're lucky, that's X. But this is no doubt. We
Right,
can't go
right.
beyond that.
Yeah, that would be like the example because I remember reading the article a while back about this baby surviving at 8 weeks. I would say that is definitely an extreme rarity,
Mhm.
and say it would definitely be like you're talking about a way it reaches maybe 80% probability of living
Yeah.
if taken out. You'd have to define it
Some,
that way.
it'd have to be something that would be medically proper. Okay, like we get the COVID vaccine. I think they said it's like 85% effective. I can't remember what it is, but they decided that whatever the percentage is a reasonable medical
Right.
landmark. So
Okay.
whatever the medical people say is a reasonable medical landmark for survival, that should be the X.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the final thought here is that you don't feel that they put enough into defining X.
X to me is arbitrary. X was something that you can say when the heartbeat starts and everybody cheers. Okay, do you have any doctors in the audience that are cheering? Okay, and if that's not the case, then what you're doing
Right.
is you're having a pep rally. Um,
Right.
if if the Texas legislature can go in front of a medical board and say life begins with the heartbeat, and the medical board does not have a counter, uh, um, they say no, it's not at the heartbeat because of this, that, and other thing. It's really down the road someplace. Good, but if you can go in front of a medical board and say heartbeat, and they say yes, we all agree, then that's X.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it medically. I'm not, nothing else.
So, but
So,
would you'd agree that this law is getting a little bit exaggerated in the
oh yeah,
news?
anything that's on it. I'll look at
Yeah.
PBS, and PBS tends to keep things fairly low key. They don't go off and they'll never say Texanistan on PBS. But other stations will. You know,
Mhm.
and I have to admit, excuse me, that I haven't been keeping up with PBS's coverage of this law, other than there's a law and there's a lot of criticism of it. But I haven't,
Mhm.
PBS would tend to do, what the Frontline would do something like this. They say the Texas abortion law, and then they talk about the stuff that we talked about. When does life start? Is it the heartbeat? Is it 20 weeks? Is it viability? You know, and
Right.
they give the facts. There'd be no hyperbole or anything. And unfortunately, I haven't been keeping up with them. So
Right.
I've been the victim of NBC News, which is, yeah,
Well, hopefully
you know.
this has been enjoyable for you.
Well, I wouldn't have gone an hour past when I was going to quit if it wasn't.
Right. I think it's been really interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to try to compile the two videos. I'm going to edit them down, take out the interruptions that
Okay.
we had. I'll cut those out and make it more of a just a standard discussion.
Yeah.
And
And
then,
really, if people if people could watch our discussion,
mhm,
some of them would say, "Yeah, he's right." Whichever he they point at, no, he's wrong. Okay, but they would do it without calling. They wouldn't say that B word or that MFer is.
right,
It will be a civilized discussion. And that's what you said you wanted to do: have civilized discussions about issues
yeah,
and see if we can get some kind of
and
resolution to them.
and
So I agree with that.
show people that civilized discussion can be had because
Yeah, exactly,
it's
exactly.
everybody's getting pushed so far apart right now that they can't talk about anything.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's hopefully people watch this and they'll, if nothing else, it'll encourage them to have the discussion
yeah.
in some way that's fruitful and everybody
Mhm.
can,
And the
share their
bottom
opinions.
line, because if you give the disclaimer, I'm sorry, if you give the disclaimer, we're just talking about the issue. We're talking about our personal beliefs and
Right,
what develops them. We're not saying that this is the way it has to be. We're
right,
saying that you, whoever is watching this, needs to find somebody that you can talk to and discuss it and come up with something more reasonable than name calling and all this
right,
other stuff. So
right.
I got no problem with that.
Cool.
So
Well,
okay, and if you go on Netflix, I get royalties for this.
no, it's the farthest these things go is my YouTube account, and then
No problem.
I use the YouTube account to share it on Facebook
Yeah, okay, that's
and
cool.
get everybody's opinion. Let me go. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording here. Okay, so as I said at the beginning of the video, I just wanted to clarify at the end here what I meant by that it's worth the experiment. So as we discussed, clarification on this, hypothetical point X in the pregnancy. The reason I said that it was worth the experiment was because, like we discussed, both the right and the left here are, I'm just to use the metaphor again, are keeping their foot on the brake when it comes to any kind of advancement in determining at what point this happens. To agree on some point there means that the right then has to admit that there's some point before X, and that the left has to admit that there will be some point after X. And that's neither side wants to really come to agreement there. And when it comes to ways of kind of inciting that discussion, this law is about as benign a way for that to happen as possible. This law itself does not result in any like we talked about, doesn't result in charges against the mother at all. Every action here takes place entirely in a courtroom, and it's just between the physician and this law and the person that started the lawsuit. So this, like I said, this is about as benign a way as possible of actually trying to coerce that discussion and to get it to a point where it could happen. And that's why I say it's worth the experiment. This law could get in the courts and get completely shot down in the end, but I think it's worth the experiment to try and see what would happen, to see if maybe the progress that's made pulls the right and the left a little bit further towards coming to an agreement on where that point X would be. And that's what I meant there. And I feel like I didn't really elaborate enough on that, but that's why I think that it's worth the experiment, as I said. So I hope you enjoyed it, and definitely let me know what you think.